Welcome back to Hilaal. I'm still in conversation with Accountability Now's Advocate Paul Hoffman. Advocate Hoffman, the seat of the public protector, the office of the public protector, is it a poison chalice when you take all the politics that come with it and all of the biasness that sometimes can be influenced within that office?
Well, Fahraaz, and please call me Paul. If I can call you Fahraaz, then you can call me Paul. What we need to recognize in relation to the public protector is that this office was created in our constitution at the inception of constitutional democracy under the rule of law in South Africa for the purpose of bedding down. It's called an institution supporting constitutional democracy. So they were bedding down democratic ideals, bedding down the idea of a supreme constitution. You know, the old South Africa, you had a parliamentary sovereignty, and what Parliament said really went. Nobody was allowed to test in the way that we can test the things that parliamentarians do today. Section 2 of the Constitution says that if the laws that are passed or the conduct that is perpetrated by the politicians is inconsistent with the Constitution, it's invalid. Now, in order to get to the point where South Africans regard themselves as owners of their Constitution, where they participate as active citizens in a democracy, rather than as passive subjects in an authoritarian apartheid regime, which is a big mind shift change. We are not going to get our new dispensation working. People, ordinary people sitting at home watching this television broadcast now, need to understand that they are the owners of constitutional democracy and that it's up to them to see to it that officials and politicians do not paint outside the lines of the dispensation that is contemplated in the Constitution. And it's very clear in Section 181 that the office of the public protector is, like all other Chapter 9 institutions, free of executive control. It reports only to Parliament, which is a multi-party body, and which is expected to act independently without fear, favor, or prejudice. Now, you can't expect people who are card-carrying members of a political party to be independent. It's very difficult to park your political allegiance outside the door and start with a clean slate and behave independently. Thuli Madonsela got that right. I would venture to suggest that none of the other public protectors, and certainly not the one presently under suspension, were able to do what Thuli Madonsela did. And South Africa needs to be grateful to her for the work that she did, because she effectively ended the Zuma era by her doggedness and her willingness to sit down and do her job properly. So what we've got to hope for with the next public protector, one of the 8 on the shortlist, is that that person will be identified through the screening and interviewing processes of Parliament that precede the appointment by the President on the recommendation of Parliament. So those 8 need to be interrogated with a view to seeing whether they will behave like Thuli Madonsela did, or that they are at risk of behaving like Busisiwe and Mkhwebane did.
Advocate Hoffman, Advocate Koleka is seen as the outright favorite. Of course, so much can change, but her role right now is the acting public protector. Now, obviously, the evidence of the Pala report had come in, and she, of course, as the acting public protector, had to deliver it, and she's seen as, you know, somebody who really didn't, how do I put it this way, want to take absolute charge of this report in trying to find President Cyril Ramaphosa guilty of whatever he was obviously accused of at that time. There's that viewpoint from many other political parties, and there are, of course, others saying this report and the way, of course, she handled it was justified. If she is to be the favorite, if she is to come into the seat of the public protector, does she come in already with a sense of a question mark to her because of the Pala Pala report, which effectively found that President Cyril Ramaphosa is not guilty of anything that had happened on his farm?
Yes, I'm afraid that she is going to be tarred with the executive mindedness brush because of the findings that she made in her Pala Pala inquiry. She's also got some political baggage from her time in the National Prosecuting Authority. She was one of the acolytes of Menzi Simelane, who the Constitutional Court sent packing because he was not a fit and proper person to be the National Director of Public Prosecutions. He came in there to unfold the vision of the ANC for a constitutional body which is enjoined to act without fear, favor, or prejudice, being the National Prosecuting Authority. And that got up the noses of a lot of prosecutors and a lot of other politicians. So the fact that she was prepared when she was working in the NPA to take a pro-ANC approach, to see herself as being a cadre of the National Democratic Revolution, securing hegemonic control of all the levers of power in the NPA for the ANC, which is a deeply, darkly unconstitutional project, will count against her. She will be grilled by Glynis Breitenbach and others because of what she did in the National Prosecuting Authority, and she will be grilled by the EFF and the ATM parties for what she has done in her Pala Pala report, where she has ignored the prima facie findings of a former Chief Justice and has said that Cyril Ramaphosa is not really a part-time farmer and is not really at risk of a conflict of interest, when objectively viewed, it's pretty clear that Cyril Ramaphosa got himself not only at risk, but in a conflict of interest situation when the dollars were stolen out of his couch at a time when they ought not to have been in his possession at all. And on the basis that he didn't report it to the Hawks, as he was obliged to do by the provisions of Section 34 of PRECA, the Prevention and Combating of Corrupt Activities Act. You know, Ramaphosa is very quick to say that Andre de Ruyter had to report his knowledge of criminal activity at Eskom to the Hawks, but he failed to do it himself when he had knowledge of the theft or the burglary at Pala Pala. So I think that although she's probably the best known of the 8 candidates, Kgaleka is going to have some difficult questions in her interview, and that she will be a highly controversial candidate if she gets over the screening and interviewing processes. I don't believe, given that we may be facing coalition government in the future, I don't believe that anybody who has a background of being a card-carrying member of the ANC or indeed of any other political party should be seriously considered as a candidate for the position of public protector, because the Constitution requires a person of impeccable integrity and complete impartiality, an independent person who is able to work, to do her or his work without fear, favor, or prejudice. That's only happened so far on Thuli Madonsela's watch.
Advocate Hoffman, I wish we had more time. I think we've taken a lot of time to discuss this, but we'd like to thank you so much for joining us here on Hilaal Live.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I hope that we've enlightened your viewers.
I hope so too. That's Accountability Now's Advocate Paul Hoffman talking about this Section 194 inquiry, which has found that Advocate Mkhwebane is guilty of misconduct. The next step now is, of course, how they are going to go ahead and impeachment. We do remember in a constitution, in a parliamentary constitution, it does take 2/3 of the seat to go ahead and impeach. If the 2/3 don't agree, she may just stay on up until her term ends later this year. After the break, I'll have your latest in news. Do stay tuned. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to Hilaal Live. My name is Fahraaz Patel. I would like to thank you, the viewer, for staying with us, and of course my colleague Luqman Shadrack for taking us through that first 1 hour. Now, several members of Parliament's Section 194 inquiry agreed that suspended Public Protector Advocate Mkhwebane is guilty of misconduct for ignoring previous court findings. They also agree with evidence that says she victimized officials during a tenure as the head of the Chapter 9 institutions. Now, members of the inquiry into Mkhwebane's fitness to hold office held a rare meeting this past weekend as it races to conclude the year-long inquiry. It now opens the channels for a new public protector to be selected this year. Joining us now to discuss this is Accountability Now's Advocate Paul Hoffman. Advocate Hoffman, good evening and thank you so much for joining us here on Hilaal Live.
Good evening to you and to your viewers as well.
Advocate, let's start obviously with Busisiwe Mkhwebane because, of course, she got such a controversial figure. But this inquiry, I mean, it was coming to that point, wasn't it, that she was going to be guilty of so much. She was given ample opportunities by the Section 194 inquiry, and she just failed to meet whatever the requirements were from their side.
Yes, I think that it's very clear that the prima facie views that the panel of Bes Nkabindi, the retired judge of the Constitutional Court headed, have all come to fruition. She was not a fit and proper person to be a public protector. She was really selected over two judges, Siraj Desai, who seemed to be Jacob Zuma's favorite at the time, 7 years ago, but wasn't. And also the judge of the High Court in Johannesburg, who has since gone on to act in the Constitutional Court. So to prefer Busisiwe Mkhwebane to two High Court judges is a dangerous thing to do. And we have reaped the harvest of that poor decision-making, which is perhaps understandable because the biggest mistake that Jacob Zuma ever made in his power of appointment was to appoint Thuli Madonsela as the previous public protector. She made his life hell. She made him pay for his renovations at Nkandla, and she was the one who insisted on the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture, which led to his political demise on the 14th of February, 2018.
Advocate Hoffman, the Advocate Mkhwebane, we always knew that there was a sense of, judging by just her approach to certain things, her bias was there towards, obviously, then President Jacob Zuma. Now, we're not saying it was completely biased, but there were elements of it that went towards him. Did that really, hurt her going forward? Because obviously, we all knew what happened in 2018. Jacob Zuma was removed as the president of the country through various, of course, constitutional ways that we are afforded in this country. But looking at it, her under the tenure of President Cyril Ramaphosa, it just was, when rather than if.
Yes, she was a deployed cadre of the RET faction. The RET faction fell from grace when Zuma was fired, and after that, her job was hell. But even before that, with that CIEX complaint that Accountability Now brought to Tuli Madonsela that she didn't quite finish, everything that Mkhwebane did in that matter was wrong. She got hammered with a personal costs order by the High Court that was confirmed by the Constitutional Court, and she is currently facing perjury charges because she lied on oath in the Constitutional Court proceedings and was caught in that lie and was called out on the lie by Justice Sisi Kampepe, who wrote the judgment of the majority in that case. So it was all downhill from there. And the CIEX report was the first major report that she brought out in months of her appointment in October 2016. So her fixed term of office ends in October, but it may end sooner if Parliament votes for her impeachment before then.
I want to talk about the Parliament impeachment because, of course, there's going to be so much happening this week and, of course, next week with that Section 194 inquiry. And again, we bring it's a matter of when rather than if, because she really is at this very moment on a hiding to nothing. And she hasn't done herself any favors with any of her representation that she has been afforded, because we do live in a democracy, we have a constitution, and everyone is allowed the ability to, of course, bring their legal representatives. She was just so inept in trying to make that happen, wasn't she?
Yes, I'm afraid she's not exactly on a hiding to nothing. She has 2 or 3 small parties backing her in the Section 194 inquiry, and they've absented themselves from the final deliberations of the committee. But what happens in Parliament is that 2/3 of the members of Parliament have to vote in favor of impeaching her. If the 2/3 threshold is not reached, then there will be a problem. But if we assume that ANC party discipline holds and the ANC votes in favor of impeachment, you can rely on the DA, the IFP, the ACDP, the Freedom Front Plus. All of those will vote in favor of impeachment, in my estimation, in my reading of the matter, and that will be a very comfortable 2/3 majority.
Advocate Hoffman, her predecessor, now Professor Tuli Madonsela, obviously had the State Capture Commission, the recommendation, the State Capture Commission report, the original draft that was given with regards to that. She set the bar quite high, didn't she, for Advocate Mkhwebane, of course, came in. And of course, it just was difficult, wasn't it, to try and really get that a high standard that a predecessor had before?
Yes, I think that what the difference between Tuli Madonsela and all of the other public protectors is that Tuli Madonsela took her constitutional mandate seriously. She accepted that she was appointed because she was regarded as a cadre of the National Democratic Revolution and all of those nice things. But she, like Vusi Pikoli before her, as National Director of Public Prosecutions, understood and acted on her constitutional mandate. She parked her political baggage outside the door, and she did her job as a servant of the people of South Africa without fear, favor, or prejudice. She applied herself to the complaints that were brought to her office. She produced reports that stood the test of review, and she was able, through the what I would call scope creep that started when it became apparent that the NPA without scorpions and the police with hawks was not enough to deal with corruption. She took over as the corruption buster of South Africa, even though the constitutional mandate of the public protector is directed at maladministration of the affairs of state and prejudice to the public through the way that the public administration is conducted in South Africa. She allowed, even though her office was not set up as an anti-corruption office, she allowed her investigators to get involved in cases like in Kandla, where there was clearly fraud and misappropriation of public money, and a different public protector might have just said, this is a criminal matter, it's not part of my mandate, I'm referring it to the police for investigation and to the National Prosecuting Authority for prosecution. That didn't happen with Thuli Modonsela, because she recognized that the criminal justice administration of South Africa had been broken by Jacob Zuma's kleptocratic tendencies, by his decision to close down the Scorpions, and by his insistence that investigative work on corruption be done by the police and prosecution work be done by the National Prosecuting Authority. When you split it up like that and the police give you a poorly prepared docket, you cannot have a successful prosecution. And there weren't any successful prosecutions in the whole of the Zuma period and beyond. We're still waiting for a big fish to go down in South Africa for corrupt activities. It hasn't really happened since the Scorpions investigated people like Tony Yengeni, the Travelgate fraudsters, and Shabir Sheikh, not to mention John Block in the Northern Cape province.
Well, yeah, those big fishes are still swimming in the high seas. After the break, my conversation continues with Advocate Hoffman. We're going to be looking ahead to who could occupy that seat in the Public Protector's Office. Do stay tuned to Hilaal Live.